Akiva, let me know if you hear the noise, that tick-tick noise like we had last time, and I'll shut my phone off.
We didn't have it last night either.
Okay. So keep
Yeah, by the way, sponsorship for this week is still available.
No, I already booked
No.
2 weeks in a row.
Oh, I realized it was this week or the next week?
No, it's this week because my where are we now? We're on the 12th? Yeah.
Yeah.
The Baba's yahrtzeit is achroin shel Pesach, and my father's is a week today, next Sunday.
Oh, so I thought you had it for next week. My apologies. Hold on a second.
I want to do 2 weeks.
2 weeks. But this is not a full week, but I'm going to make sure you get enough broadcast to cover it.
It's fine.
Okay, we'll use.
Okay.
Okay, so tell me here it is. Okay, so this week's broadcast, I know it's not the same if Yosy Simon's the voice of the Siyam Shas reading it. This week's broadcast is Leilu Nishmas, Bleema bas Reb Yosy Yehoshua. And the Neshama Shabbos yahrtzeit is achroin shel Pesach. You always managed to give Kiddush and Shul achroin shel Pesach, right?
I did only 1 year. Only 1 year. It was a disaster.
Nobody ate? What happened?
Nobody ate. I had grape juice. I had fish in the jar. Remember the jar fish?
Yeah. That's right.
And that Ascalon vodka. It was
you probably had Pesach food.
No, it's very hard to find decent gebroks anyway.
I hope that Australian brown grape juice wasn't yours.
No, that's Lubavitch grape juice.
Debbie makes amazing muffins that are gebroks that like mamish takes like chametz.
Oh really?
Yeah.
I can't serve it to the whole shul.
Even the achroin shel Pesach mished yo, you're not supposed to. What happened to everyone?
So I tried to buy some stuff from, but it was it was Erev Yom Tov. Like there's not much that you can buy. It was just a disaster. So I said, you know what?
I'm not gonna try it. So you did it this Shabbos. Okay.
No big deal.
Okay, this is your father's mother?
My mother's mother.
Your mother's mother. So what was her last name?
Weiss.
Weiss, okay. It'll be up. When I post it onto YouTube, you'll be able to send a link to your mother. Okay?
No problem.
Okay. So there's 3 types of cooking appliances that they had in those days. They had a kira. A kira, imagine a box that's 24 inches by 12 inches by 12 inches with a partition in the middle. So basically, we'll call it a tandem stove, a dual burner. So there were two boxes that are together, or one box with a partition in the middle, and you have 2 12 by 12 by 12 holes. And you can either, the way they heated it up was they placed coals or some other fuel in the bottom of each of the 2 compartments. And the pots to cook them, if they were smaller pots, they put them into the box itself, sat right on the coals. If it was a larger pot, it would rest on the rim above the box, and the heat would come and cook it from below. That was the appliance that was called a kira. They had another appliance called a kupach. A kupach was the same thing as what we just described in a kira, except instead of being a tandem stove, it was one box with one stove that only had room for one pot. By the fact that it was smaller, it made that it retained heat better, and things would stay a little hotter on the kupach. And then there's the ultimate cooking machine, the oven, the tanner. The tanner was like a pyramid. It had a small hole on top, but it was much wider on the bottom. To put the fuel on the bottom, it was constricted at the top, so it got really, really hot, much hotter than the kira and even than the kupach, and that provided the most heat. We're discussing in our parak right now the loch of the kira, which is their stove, which had the least amount of heat in it. Reb Yosy Simon Paskin, our current day stoves, as well as our current day ovens. Okay, so let me shut my phone off.
No, it's somebody's calling in, needs to be on mute. Akiva, can you mute the callers west of the Rockies?
I don't know where Akiva went.
Okay, I just shut my phone off. Did that help? can't hear anybody, but I hope it is.
Yeah, it's not
Yeah,
there.
yes.
Okay, so it was probably my phone. Okay, it's off now. Zok to Gemara. So Reb Moshe Feintuch Paskins that our current day ovens and our current day stoves have the loch of a kira, and we'll see how that plays out as we learn the Gemara. Kira shisikua b'kashu v'gavav. Now I remember on Erev Yom Tov, I don't have the experience in building fires that Chaim C has, but when I built my little fire, my little 9x13 pan, that by the way still has a cheese Danish in it that it didn't fully burn, so I wasn't very successful in my endeavor. I noticed that after the flame on the logs that I had in there, the pieces of wood died down, if I took a stick and I smished it around a little bit, the fire flamed out. The fire flamed up, flared up. It actually flared up just by moving around and poking at the burnt wood. And what I learned in Parakira, there's a reason for that, is as a log begins to burn, it forms an outer layer of ash on the burned part, and it burns from the outside towards the core of the wood. That ash covers the flame, blocks the flame. When you poke it, you actually shake the ash off, and you're exposing the unoxidized, unburnt wood, and boom, it flares up into a flame. And I actually saw that as I was burning. I was doing some serious chita b'gecholim, amongst pouring gasoline, amongst doing everything, just trying to get it to stay on fire. But when you shake the flame around and you take off the outer layer of ash, it flares up. So if you use as fuel for your kira kash or gavava, which doesn't really create any type of glowing coal when it burns, it just burns out. It burns similar to a liquid fuel. Once it burns out, it's gone. So kash, Rashi tells us, is the stubble after you cut the wheat stalk. With the part remaining in the ground is called kash. Gavava is the part that you cut off, the stalk that you cut off that you're not going to use. So those are lightweight fuels, so to speak. Those have no restriction. You can put any type of tafshel on it, leave it on Shabbos, it doesn't matter, because there is nothing to be mechata. You can only be mechata something that develops a layer of ash of the outside surface, has still something burning on the inside. These are such fine things, they just burn up. The gefes of the eitzim, but if you use as fuel gefes or eitzim, Rashi says gefes are after they squeeze out sesame seeds for their oil, that the mass or the mash that's left over, that's called gefes. And eitzim are wooden logs. So there, lo yitain ache yigra. If you're not allowed to put stuff on the flame, unless either yigra, if you shovel out all of the coals, so you take everything out, and now you're just remaining with the retained heat of the walls of the kira. And if there's no coals there, there's nothing to stoke. Or if you cover it with a small layer of ash. As I mentioned, it's the ash that prevents it from flaring up. So by you covering it with a layer of ash, it stops it from flaring up. That's one shot. And Rashi says, it cools it off. But there are those who learn that just the mere fact that you're taking a physical action, a positive action, to cool off your coals, that shows that you for sure are no longer interested in flaring them up, because you're taking a positive action to cool them down, and that creates in your mind an awareness that you're not going to be mechata. Even once you make grorf or nitinus offer, which the Gemara is going to call kitim, even after you either grifa or katima, even after you did that, you still cannot put a cooking dish on it. If you have meat cooking or shel cooking, you cannot leave it on the flame. You can leave water on the flame. Because with the tafshel, we're still afraid, water cooks up fast. The tafshel, we're still afraid that you're going to do something to hasten the cooking. You have guests that are arriving in 15 minutes and your food isn't fully ready. You're going to panic and you're going to rush up the flame so that your food should be ready for Friday night. But with Hill says, Chamin v'tafshel. You're even allowed to leave cooking food on the flame if it's garif or cotton. You could take something off the stove. If it's still you can even return something to the stove. Now, this is a little bit unclear what it is, and the Gemara is going to clarify exactly how to understand each of these items in the Mishnah. Now, there's a very big machlokes, which all of our cooking is based on, and that's the machlokes Chananya and the Chacham. And the shaila is, there's two issues that we have to look at. Issue number one is, are you allowed to leave your food on the flame on Shabbos? When we go to shul, we have our chicken soup cooking, it's hot, it's not cooking, it's on the stove. Am I allowed to leave my chicken soup on my burner? Am I allowed to let it stay hot on the burner? So that when it comes from shul, it's still piping hot. A. B is, if I have other food cooking, am I allowed to leave it on the stove? And C is, what if Friday night I want to taste some of the chol? Could I take the pot off the flame, take something out of it, and put it back on Shabbos? So these are the two questions that we have. Now, Chananya holds, Shehiyah, merely leaving your pot on the stove, has no restriction. You're allowed to leave it on the stove without any action at all. And there are more paskins like that, and many people, in fact, just leave something on the stove on Shabbos without any type of blech. And the Gemara wants to know, but yet there are others who holds that even Shehiyah requires, the Gruf and Ketuma requires the blech. Now the question is, what does our Mishnah hold like, and how will we understand our Mishnah? And that gets us into our Gemara. Iboilu, my lo yitein. When our Mishnah says lo yitein at yigroif, what does that mean? Does that mean lo yachzeru? Are we talking about somebody who took something off the flame, and now it's a question of whether or not he's allowed to put it back on Shabbos? Avalishah shmashin. But if he had something that he left on the flame from before Shabbos, that's not a problem at all. Af apisha einigar for einikatim, that requires no action at all. And if that's pshat in our Mishnah, it will be consistent with the Tana whose name was Chananya. Umani Chananya. That would be consistent with Chananya. The Tanya Chananya Omer, Kol Shehu Kamachal Ben Drusoi. Once it's a third cook, Mutter L'Shaisoi Al Gabi Akira. You're allowed to leave your food on the flame. Avapi She'enigar Fe'enikatim. So is that what our Mishnah holds? So is our Mishnah referring only to Chazara? But Shehiyah is out of the scope of our Mishnah, and that has no restrictions. Or possibly, Lishasnan. Our Mishnah that talks about these restrictions applies to Shehiyah. The Igar of B'chatamin, if you make Gerufa and Ketuma, one or the other, only then are you allowed to allow your pot to remain on the stove on Shabbos. Eloi loy. But if not, then you're not even allowed to allow your pot to stay there. And if you are restricted, if just to leave something on the pot, surely if you want to put something back on the flame on Shabbos, surely it should also have those same restrictions. So that's the fundamental shaila. Now,
Yossi,
yes.
I'm sorry. Can you just remind me again, what does garif and katan mean? And because it's a term that I've always struggled with. I didn't understand.
Garif means you take all the coals out of the oven, so there's no source of heat anymore.
Okay.
Well, not out of the oven. In this case, we're talking about a kira. We take all the coals out of the kira. Now, the walls of the kira retain some level of heat, but you're not allowed to have any fuel in there.
Okay.
Katum is taking ash and spraying a light layer of ash over the coals, over the remaining fuel. And what that accomplishes is one of two things. It does physically cool the flame. So and what it does more than that is it puts in your mind the fact that you did a physical action to cool off the flame, creates a mindset that you're definitely not going to be enhancing the flame. You're definitely not going to flare it up because you've just taken an action to cool it down. So
that's done before Shabbos?
This has to be done before. You surely can't do it on Shabbos.
Okay.
So garif, remove coals, and katan means you cover it with ashes.
Correct. You spray a thin layer of ashes.
And both are done before Shabbos to indicate make a simon that you shouldn't.
Well, garif is not a simon. You can no longer be mechata. It's physically impossible to be
Okay.
mechat and cholim if they're no
It's
longer
an
there.
action. It's an action you take to prevent.
To mitigate the chash of Shemi Yechda.
So 1 second. So according to Hananya, you're allowed
Thank
to,
you.
if it's
You're allowed to
machzor,
what?
you machzor.
If it's Gorah Fagotim, with a blech.
No, he says kol shu ma'achol ben say. You're allowed
Mutar
to.
l'shhoisa, you're allowed to leave it on the kira if it was there before Shabbos.
But you're not allowed to be chazor.
But chazara, you still need it. So Hananya will have to learn that our Mishnah is not speaking about Shehiyah. Our Mishnah says that there are restrictions. And Hananya holds by Shia there are no restrictions. So Hananya would have to learn that our Mishnah is talking about chazara. Now, interesting enough, you both mentioned, David mentioned and Mechi mentioned, that the Gerufa and the Ketuma can't do on Shabbos. You got to do that before Shabbos. So Tosfos is medayik that when it says in the Mishnah Lo Yitin Achi Yitin Sefer, we can't be speaking only about putting something back on the stove on Shabbos, because on Shabbos it would be impossible to yigroif or Yitin Sefer. Zok Tosfos, even if it's before Shabbos, but it's right before Shabbos, at a point where you would no longer be able to heat up food, you're not even allowed to put it on the stove before Shabbos unless it's Gerufa or Ketuma. So Tosfos learns that putting a pot on the stove right before Shabbos does not fall under the category of Shehiyah. That's under the category of Chazara. Shehiyah is only if the pot was on the flame from much earlier. In other words, the amount of time that it'll take to heat it up. So let's say a pot of soup takes 20 minutes to heat up. So if you left it there from before 20 minutes before Shehiyah, then that would be called Shehiyah. But putting it on the stove 5 minutes before Shehiyah and turning on the flame, that would require Gerufa Ketuma, means it would require a blech. Now, to understand what Gerufa Ketuma is, in today's language, where there's no coals, so Reb Moshe says you have to have a blech, and he also says not all the poskim hold you need this, but a lot of poskim hold you do. You also have to put some type of sign on your knobs or remove those knobs. Now, there's a lot of different shilas about different situations. What if you have a warmer? In Israel, it's called a plata, that's either on or off, cannot be adjusted. There's a shilah in the achroin if that's allowed to be used, if you have to put a piece of silver foil on it to act as a blech, or maybe since it cannot be adjusted anyway, it shouldn't be a problem. Then there's a shilah, what if you leave it on the stove before Shabbos at the highest setting? You can't raise it anymore, so maybe that should be mutter. But over there, most people are machmer because it's possible that you'll lower the flame and then you'll be afraid and you'll raise it again.
So yes, is a blech is garf and katam or either or both?
A blech acts as probably katam because it's covering over the flame and thereby reducing the amount of heat.
Is there any nafkamina between garf or katam?
Halachically?
Or I don't know.
Physically, it's a different action.
No, I know, but halachically, are there any nafkaminas?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
Not that I'm aware of. Okay. Now, again, katam doesn't mean you smother the flame with ashes. Just a light coating of ashes covering over the coals will be enough because it's symbolic. You're doing physically an action that's cooling it off, which takes your mindset out of that situation to try to hasten its cooking.
I would imagine that according to Reb Moshe Feinstein, Gorof would be covering the knobs and Kotam would be the blach. Because Gorof is that you take away the coals. So if you take away the knobs, then you're taking away the coals. You can't adjust it, right?
You're not taking away the heat. Gorof is more. You're actually taking away the source of heat.
But the problem is not the problem. Right, but Gaurav, the idea is not that you're taking away the heat. The idea of taking away the heat by Gaurav is that you physically cannot adjust the heat. It's gone.
I hear what you're saying, but I don't think that could be true because nobody holds that you need both Gaurav and Katan. The Mishnah at most says you need one or the other. So it's not likely that Moshe should have made up his own chumrah to require both actions.
Got it.
Okay, so let's see the Gemara Vayter. So Iboilu, Hailo Yitin is Lo Yachzaru, Avalishus Mashin, which is the shita that we like. Af al pi shein garf and katam imani chananya he. The Tanya chananya omer Chol shehu kamaychel ben Yosoi mutter l'shoish al gabekira afal pi she'ein garf in the kadam. Oidil malachumra that lishoisnan. That our Mishnah puts these restrictions in place, even if you just want to let your pot remain on the stove to stay warm for tonight or for tomorrow. The igar v'katam in iloi loi the koshkin hachzer. If shehiyah has restrictions, surely chazara has restrictions. Tashma. So now the Gemara learns the Mishnah and analyzes it clause by clause, and gets now after we learn this Gemara, we'll have clarity in what every word of the Mishnah means. Tashma. V'dekatani trei bavi b'masnisim. Our Mishnah sort of expressed the machlokes between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel with two stanzas, two clauses. A, Beis Shammai Yomim Chamin Avaloi Tavshel, Ubeis Hillel Yomim Chamin V'Tavshel, and B, Beis Shammai Yomim Noitlin Avaloi Machzirin, Ubeis Hillel Yomim Af Machzirin. So let's analyze Pashat Taich in the Mishnah. If you're going to learn the Chumrah, that the beginning of our Mishnah that talks about Grufo Ketuma is referring to merely leaving your pot on the stove, so this is how we would read the Mishnah. Kira shisiku v'kashu v'gavava. If you heated up a kira with kash or gavava, no restrictions. Mashin aleh tafshin. But the gevas of eitzim, if you used a more robust fuel, a fuel that actually creates coals, then you have restrictions. Lo yisha achi yigra. If you're not even allowed to leave your pot staying warm on the flame, unless you remove all the coals, oy achi yitin efer. And now we get to the meat. Now that we say you're allowed to make shehiyah, once it's gar for cotton, what in fact are you allowed to make shehiyah on? All this work doesn't even allow you to keep your food on the stove. All it allows you to do is to keep hot water on the stove so you can have a hot tea after your suda. Avaloi tafshel. Cooking meat? Absolutely not. No chol, no meat. Nothing's ever allowed to be left on the flame according to Beis Shammai. And when I say nothing's ever allowed, I mean something that's partially cooked. We did learn in earlier Gemaras that if it was completely raw meat, that there's no way in the world it could possibly be cooked for tonight, and therefore a person doesn't even think about it tonight, he's only worried about tomorrow, and in order for it to be cooked by tomorrow, he doesn't need to do any intervention at all. There it would be mutter. Now there's another exclusion to Beis Shammai's prohibition. Mitztamik v'raloi. If it's fully cooked, and now it's at the point where if it cooks more, it's going to get ruined, it's going to dry out, so there's no incentive or urge to stoke the flame. Because as a matter of fact, you wish the flame could be barely a simmer, because you just want to keep it warm, you don't want it to get dried out. There Beis Shammai would also agree a tafshel is allowed. But on the regular
Why
flame,
isn't he afraid? Why is Beis Shammai not afraid that you're going to move away the coals to cool it down?
Because you could just take the pot off.
Oh, okay.
Ubesil says once you have this protection of Gorah for cotton, you're even allowed to leave. We're talking about Gorah for cotton. There are no coals left. And still Beis Shammai doesn't allow it. Ubesil chamin v'tavshel. Chamin and tavshel. V'chehechi the pligi, v'lishos, and the same way they're arguing by Shehiyah. So the first half of the Mishnah is speaking about Shehiyah. Now the Mishnah is going on to Chazar. The Chayech the Pliga Belishos, Palag Nani Belahachsu. The Shammai Rabbi Noitel Navaloi Machsirim. The Shammai Chazara is never allowed, no matter what precautions you've taken. The Silaimim Af Machsirin, this heter of Gorah Fakotim, which works to allow you to leave your pot on the flame from before Shabbos, also works to put your pot back onto the flame on Shabbos. So the Mishnah reads beautifully if you learn that the Mishnah is putting restrictions on Shehiyah. But if you want to learn that the Mishnah is going to Chananya, it's going to be difficult to learn the Mishnah. And let's try it out. This is how you would have to read it. You're even allowed to make chazor. The gafes of eitzim lo yachzer achi yigroif or achi nefer. For chazara, there's a restriction that you need garif or cotton. Now,
so we don't hold like Beis Hillel.
We surely do hold like Beis Hillel.
Well, we're allowed to put the pot back on the bach. Right.
If there's a blech and you take a pot off the
I
flame,
forget.
you're allowed to place it back.
I
Now,
can
there's
do it.
5 conditions in order to be able to do that. You have to have a blech, and when you took it off the flame, you had to have in mind to put it back. You couldn't have let it out of your hand, which means if you put it down on the table
Right.
and come back 10 minutes later,
Right,
you
but
had it in your hand the whole time, and it could
Does
not have
Beis,
cooled
is
off
that our
completely.
Chumar or does Beis Hillel say that too?
I guess I don't know. I don't know where that's in the Gemara. I just know that from Halacha.
Right.
I'm sure we'll get to the Gemara
Okay.
that discusses those conditions. Zok Gemara, Umahein Machzir. Again, the whole Mishnah is talking about Chazorah. What is allowed in this Chazorah? You're allowed to put back food cooking on the stove on Shabbos. So far, so good. It's the next clause that's going to trip us up. You're not allowed to make Chazorah. What new item will we learn from this last clause? This last clause is not adding anything. The Shammai says, well, that's exactly what he said a moment ago, that you cannot take tavshel off. I'm sorry, you cannot make chazara on the tavshel. So, in fact, Gemara, Hasulamali, this last clause does not help me. If you learn the Mishnah speaking about Shehiyah, this last clause is telling me that the machlokes also extends to chazara. But if the Mishnah is only talking about chazara, what is this last clause adding? It's actually adding nothing. So the Mishnah makes no sense at all reading Chananya, which means that our Mishnah will not be consistent with Chananya. So to Gemara, our Mishnah indeed could be consistent with Chananya, but we have to use David Zolti's favorite technique. But we have to renovate the Mishnah. We have to renovate the Mishnah. And this is how we renovate it. Now, the Gemara is going to do such a bad renovation project. It's cutting and pasting and chopping and mincing. And you might ask, why is the Mishnah or is the Gemara going through such great lengths to twist itself into a pretzel to make the Mishnah consistent with Chananya? It's a machlokes tanoim. Chananya is a Tana. So why don't we just say that the Mishnah is going according to the Rabbanan, and then you don't have to twist the Mishnah into a pretzel. And this is a very key toisus. The toisus at the top says, Zok toisus. You want to know why the Gemara is twisting itself into a pretzel to make Chananya consistent with our Mishnah? Because toisus holds that we pass like Chananya. Therefore, since Toisvis and Rashi on Lamed Zayin and Beis are going to tell us that they pass like Chananya, since they side in the Gemara, they said the Gemara likes Chananya better, and that's why the Gemara is doing whatever it could to make our Mishnah consistent with Chananya. Now, the Rambam and the Rif actually paskin like the Chachamim, which is major l'chumer, which would mean every time we wanted to leave anything on the stove, we would need to have a blech. And there's a big shaila in the poskim why we're makel like Rashi and the Tosfos rather than be machmer like the Rif and the Rambam. And there's even a Shimon Eider quotes from one of the achroinim that it might even be on the gather of Mutu Yishagin Bayum Ezidin, because he quotes from somebody that says, Klal Yisrael loves their Oynik Shabbos. Us in the Agudah can appreciate that. Klal Yisrael loves their Oynik Shabbos. If you're going to restrict their warm food on Shabbos, they're going to reject that Gezerah. So because of that, let's just leave it the way it is. Let's rely on Chananya, or let's rely on the Bali Tosfos and Rashi. Anyway, so I just wanted to highlight that because this is a very important Tosfos, because this is one of the rayas. This is one of the places where Tosfos shows that we do paskin like Chananya.
Why is it that we don't paskin like the Roiv? We find this often that there's a single Tana and there's the Chachamim, and we have a klal, we go after the Roiv. Whatever happened to that?
That's a good question, but let me ask you a question. I'm just trying to envision this discussion in the Besmedrash. There were two Rabbanim who said it's Osir, Chananya said it's Mutter. Everybody else in the Besmedrash was rallying behind who?
Okay, so when you say Chachamim, you imagine it's more than two. Imagine it's everybody else against one.
From the Shonim, it sounds, at least in the post-Gemara era, that people didn't really like that Chomer. But it's a good point. If everywhere else you go Basarayv, why don't you go Basarayv by Chananya? I don't know. The simple answer, I don't know. It's a very good point. Chananya is a yachid. I mean, maybe as we go into the Gemara, it'll come out. I never looked at the Gemara with that perspective, but it's a very good question. Indeed, it's a very good question. Why are we going? Not only are we going passing like a yachid neged rabbim, we're passing lakula like a yachid neged rabbim. Yeah. So Dr. Gemara, this is how we're going to re-engineer the Mishnah. Kira shesiku b'kashu legavava, machzirin aleh tafshel, be'kefes uve'etzem lo yachshir at sheyigrav o yachiyit niseifer. So far, so good. Here is where we're starting to add into the Mishnah. Avalishais, but for shehiyah, mashin afilu she'negarif einikatim, umahin mashin. So now the first clause with the machlekes b'shamai and b'sil quoted in the Mishnah is not even talking about the subject matter of the Mishnah, which is chazara. It's talking about shehiyah, which we've inserted into the Mishnah. The mahin mashin, what is she allowed without any restriction? And now we're going to get back to our feature presentation. We're going to get back to chazara that the Mishnah started with. This heter, that if you're gar for kotam, you're allowed to put something back on the flame, is not agreed by everybody. Beishamai holds you're never allowed to do chazara, period, full stop, even with garif and kotam. This Mishnah is only following Basil's shita that says it's allowed chazara af machzirin if it's garif and kotam. So that's exactly Chananya shita. So that's the first attempt at bringing a raya to the Rabbanim. It failed. I can't say it failed miserably. It took a lot of work to explain the Mishnah according to Chananya, but right now Chananya is still standing. Tashma. Now we'll try another raya. Although they're Amiroyim, but they were elders, and we respected how they learned Pshat in the Mishnah. Amarav. And what did they say? Lo shanu el al gabe. That heter that it says in the Mishnah is only referring to pulling the pot on top of the kira. So it's resting on the rim. If you had a small pot that you wanted to place down into the actual kira, right on top of those coals, also that will be also. So let's analyze that. If our Mishnah learns like Chananya, so now we're trying to prove Chananya's side. If you'll say that our Mishnah is speaking about lahachzer and only there, does it require gar v'kotam? Then haini deshani ben toichel al gaba. That's why it makes sense why we made a distinction between toich and al gaba. And what would that distinction be? Zot Rashi, the chimashi l'soicha, the she'enik rufa. If you're going to make shehiyah on an enik rufa, you're actually matmin mamish beremitz. You're actually putting the pot right there into the coals. That's something that the Gemara understands would be problematic. If you want to learn the Mishnah like the Rabbanan, that's even saying that shehiyah requires gar for kotam, mali toicha mali al gaba. What's the difference if it's toicha al gaba? There's nothing to be concerned about. If it's gar for kotam, there's nothing in there. If there's nothing in there, why should it be usher to put the pot inside the kira? Zok to Gemara. Mi savris Rav Chelba Areshakai. Do you think Rav Chelba's comment was on the Resha of the Mishnah, which is on the Tzad HaHeter? A Seifakai. He's actually going on the Seifa of the Mishnah. Uveis Hillel Aimrim, Veis Hillel said, Af Machzir. Veis Hillel said that if it's Gar for Katim, not only can you do Shehiyah, you can also do Chazar. And on Chazar, there's a distinction. Doing Shehiyah inside the oven, when it's Gar for Katim, there's no problem. But doing Chazara, even though it's Gar for Katim, still poses a problem. Because Rashi mentioned that there's two reasons why Chazara is not allowed. A is you might be Mechata de Gechalab, but there's actually a secondary reason why Chazara is not allowed. And that is because it's Mechsik Mavashal. If someone sees you taking a pot and putting it in to a kira on Shabbos, he thinks you're cooking up a new dish. And Bishul is also on Shabbos. So because of Mechsik Mavashal, that's a reason to prohibit even placing a pot on Shabbos into a kira that's garf and katan. Zok Gemara Tashma. Now we're going to try another raya to see who our Mishnah holds like. Beis kiros hamasimos. Again, this is a brisa that's, I guess, an add-on to our Mishnah. Beis kiros hamasimos.
Yossi, I'm not clear what the raya we're trying to bring here. We're trying to bring the raya that
the way to read our Mishnah is like Chananya, and that our Mishnah must be speaking about Shehiyah.
Okay.
So if it's speaking, if it's speaking about Shehiyah, and Shehiyah is allowed even if there's still coals in the oven, then I understand why Rav would say, although you could leave the pot on top, you can't put it down in the actual coals. But if we're speaking about Chazara and it's all Gor for Katan, and that's where you're putting your pot in, what's the difference if there's no coals left in the stove? What's the difference if I put the pot on top of the stove or in the stove? Well, that's more answered. Putting it in the stove has a new problem of mechsik from avasha.
Okay, got it. Okay.
Zok the more about Toshma. Beis kiras hamasimos. You have two kiras that are side by side. Achas grufa ketuma. One is grufa ketuma prepared properly for Shabbos. Ve'achas she'eni grufa ve'eni ketuma, and one still has its blazing coals in it. So the halacha is, mashin al gabe grufa ketuma. You are allowed to make shehiyah on the kira that is gar for katan. Ve'ein mashin al she'eni grufa ve'eni ketuma. So right off the bat, this is not going to be consistent with Chananya, because even if it's allowing it's saying a chiddush that even though it's next door to one that's not Gorf or not Kotum, you're allowed to make Shehiyah on the Grufa, the Ketubah. But no one even considers making Shehiyah without Grufa and Ketubah. So let's see how this plays out. It's a little bit of a complicated process. And you don't say that the heat from the next pot over, from the next kira, adds heat here, and then there's a chash, I might flare up the flame next door. You don't say that. Now, umahein mashin, what could you make shehiyah on after it's gar forgotten? The Shammai Arim v'loy klum, no shehiyah at all. The Shammai disagrees with this whole thing. You're never allowed to make shehiyah, no matter what you did. Uvesil Arim chamin avoloy tavshel, which is what the Shammai shita was in our Mishnah. Okar, if you took the pot off the flame, Divra kol yachzer chazor is for sure not allowed. Again, that's not consistent with our Mishnah. Our Mishnah said that the same achroin they have by Shehiyah, even according to the Rabbanon, they have by chazor as well. That once it's gar for katim, they still allowed chazor. Divra Reb Meir. So for sure, Reb Meir is inconsistent with our Mishnah, no matter how you learn. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, he's a little bit more lenient. He says, Beishamai Omer chamin avoloy tavshel, u'Besil Omer chamin v'tavshel. So that's exactly how we learned the Mishnah, if you hold that the Mishnah is prohibiting Shehiyah like the Rabbanon of Chananya. So if you're going to learn the Mishnah according to the Rabbanon, at least our Mishnah could fit into one of these two shitas, and Rabbi Yehuda would be the author of our Mishnah. If you learn that our Mishnah only requires Grufel Ketuma for Chasora, but for Shehiyah, it doesn't require anything at all, Masnisin Mani. Our Mishnah will be inconsistent with Lo Rabbi Yehuda, or Lo Reb Meir. And the Gemara gets into detail, even though it's obvious how none of these would stem with our Mishnah. Reb Meir, if you want to say that our Mishnah is going to be consistent with Reb Meir, well, Kashalu Beishamai Bechada, you have one major problem with Beishamai, because Beishamai says that you're allowed to make Shehiyah, because Beishamai says in our Mishnah you're allowed to make Shehiyah on Chamin if it's Ein Negarov and Ein Nekatim, according to Chananya. But here Beishamai says you can't make Shehiyah on anything. So it's Kashal Beishamai B'chada, Beisil B'tarti. There's two problems with Beisil. A is in our Mishnah, Beisil allowed you to make Shehiyah without Gruf of Ktuma, both Chamin and Tavshel. And here, according to Reb Meir, Beisil says Chamin of a loy Tavshel. And the second problem is, the way we're learning our Mishnah, by Shehiyah, you don't need Gar for Katam at all. And in Reb Meir, you do need Gar for Katam. So Reb Meir for sure is not consistent with our Mishnah. Rabbi Yehuda, and even according to Rabbi Yehuda, you have a problem, Kasha Grufa Ktuma. The problem is, Rabbi Yehuda says you need to have Gar for Katam to be able to make Shia, the way Hananya learns our Mishnah, for Shahir, you don't need Gar for Katan. So our Mishnah, if you want to say our Mishnah is consistent with Hananya, it will not be consistent with Rabbi Yehuda or Rabbi Meir. I'm not sure why that's such a big deal, but that's how the Gemara has a kasha. So let's learn our Mishnah is like Hananya. It only puts a restriction on Chazara, not on Shahir. Well, now it will be inconsistent with even Rabbi Yehuda, because Rabbi Yehuda says that even you need Gruva Ketuma for Shahir. Zok Gemara, you're right. The Tana Didan, Sover Law, Rabbi Yehuda Bechada. In one point, our Tana does agree with Rabbi Yehuda, Upolagala Bechada, and disagrees with him in another point. Sover Law, Rabbi Yehuda Bechada, which is Bechamen V'Tavshel V'Noitel Machsir. As far as the two Machloek in between B'Shamai and Basil, he is identical to what we wrote in the Mishnah. The only difference is that Rabbi Yehuda is talking about Gar for Katan, and our Mishnah says for Shehiyah, you don't need Gar for Katan. The Ilutan Didon Sover Lishois, the Achopisha, ain't a Gar for Katan. The Sover, the Lishos Nami Gar for Katan, in Eloi. So at the end of the day, our Mishnah is not consistent with Rav Meir or Rav Yehuda. It's similar to Rav Yehuda.
Yeah, I mean, if we're not gonna, it's not gonna be consistent with Rabbi Yehuda in one of them. Why bother changing it at all? Like,
I guess the Gemara has this approach that let's try to deviate from what the people are saying as little as possible.
Right.
We might not conform, but we want to try to stay as close to the crowd as possible. The Gemara always finds it unusual when you have a machlokes, the kotza ala kotza. So the Gemara always tries to bring the individual opinions closer together. But you're right. At the end of the day, the Gemara's kasha that our mission is not consistent with Rabbi Yehuda or Rabbi Meir is true. It's not consistent with either of them. But the Gemara says, but it's partially somewhat consistent and similar to what Rabbi Yehuda says, so that makes it a little better. Okay, so that's really the end of the sugya. The Gemara doesn't seem ever to resolve who our Mishnah holds like, and it remains a subject. And we have one clue that Tosfos gave us so far from the top, that from the fact that the Gemara really tried to make our Mishnah stim with Chananya seems to indicate that our Gemara holds like that. And it's going to become even clearer on the base. So let's see what the Gemara says over here. Iboilu. The Gemara has a shayla. Mahu lismoich ba. Are you allowed to, if you have a kira, now let's say it's not gorf and it's not cotton, right? So you're not allowed to make chazar. You're not even allowed to make shehi according to their abundant. Would you be allowed to lean a pot up against this kira? So that's how Rashi learns. Kedeir etzel doifen akira beloy grufa. It was not grufa. So we have a kira that's not grufa. You for sure cannot put a pot on top of it or in it, but can you put a pot beside it, leaning on it? Tosfos adds the ila hachshetnan. Even if you hold that you don't need grufa ketuma, so if you don't need grufa ketuma to leave a pot on the flame, you only need grufa ketuma to put a new pot on the flame. So what would the shaila be? The shaila here would be if it's not even cooked a third, where even Chananya would hold that's a problem. What will be the halacha if I just leaned it on the pot on the outside? If I leaned my pot on the outside of the kira, but I didn't actually put it on top of the kira, would that be more lenient? Let's re-invoke, let's bring that old brisa that we discussed earlier. Let's see how it impacts the shayla. Shtei kiras hamasimus. There are two kiras that are side by side, which is very similar to leaning. Achas grufa ketuma, v'achas she'ena grufa ketuma. The loch is mashin al gabi grufa ketuma. You're allowed to put a pot on the kira that's grufa ketum. V'alfa gab the kasolak lehavla meidach. Even though it is getting some heat from the neighboring kira. Now, smicha is the same thing. It's getting some heat from the neighboring kira, even though it's not on the kira. So you seem to have a raya that leaning smicha is going to be mutter. Zok Gemara, no. Dilma shiny hasam, the kiva the midli shalut ba'avira. Maybe over there, the pot sitting on top of the kira. So since it's sitting on top of the ketira, it actually it's surrounded by air, and it cools off more. Smichos is not on top; it's beside it, so it's not surrounded by air, and maybe that would be worse. Zakamar Tashma, Damar Absafar Amar B'chia, Katma V'nislavsa. What happens if you put a layer of ashes on top of coals? So whether you did it for the Chazara, according to Chananya, or if you did it for the Shehiyah, according to the Rabbanon, you put ashes on it. But what happened is there's some wind came and it flared up on its own. So even though you put those ashes, the flame didn't die down, the flame actually became more vigorous. The halach is Saim Chinla, you're still allowed to lean a pot on the outside of it, which is exactly our case. Umekayim and Alel, you're also allowed to continue to do the Chazara, the Shehiyah. And the Noitl Mimena, you can take pots off the flame, Umachsirin, you can make Chazara. In other words, even if it's Nislavsa, it doesn't eliminate the Katima that you did, and the Katima still is effective. But it's pretty explicit here. It says Saimchava. Shema Mina, Lismoich Nami. Katma'in, Loi Katmaloi. You see, even for Smicha, it was only allowed because the Kira had originally been prepared because they made Katima. But had they not done Katima on this Kira, it would not have been allowed to even lean up a pot against it to get heat from the outside of the wall. In fact, the Gemara, I don't think you have a good raya. Because I think when it says Lismaich in the Brisa, I think it's Lav Dafka. Why do I think it's Lav Dafka? Well, let's look at the Brisa. The whole Brisa seems to be wishy-washy. Utameich, it says Noitlin Umachsirin. Noitlin Mimena, the Katani, Kat Min, Loikat Maloi. Taking a pot off a flame, there's never a prohibition. There's never a problem taking a pot off a flame. So it says V'noitlin Mimena, even though you're allowed to take a pot off a flame no matter what. The question is, Shehiyah or Chazor, but taking a pot off a flame is never restricted. Yet the Brisa sticks in the word Noitlin. Why is that? Elatana Noitlin Mishum Achsirin. Really, the halacha that the Tana was trying to impart was the fact that you're allowed to put something back on the flame. But Noitlin and Machsirin goes together, taking the pot off, putting the pot on. So Hachanami, maybe Soimchin is Lav Davke. And really, you could be soimich even against a kira that does not have katima. But it only says soimchin in the Brisa, mishum mekaymin, because soimchin and mekaymin are two actions that sort of go together. In fact, that makes no sense at all. Hachiyashta, hasam noitin umachsirin bechad mokanhu. Tana noitin mishum machsirin. Noitin machsirin means it makes sense that it goes together. They're two similar actions. I can take it off, I can put it on. It makes sense why the Tana would put them together. But so therefore, it makes sense. Smicha means taking a pot, putting it on the outside of the kira, and leaning it or pushing it against the outside wall of the kira. Mekaymin means keeping a pot on top of a kira. How, in any way, can you say those are connected? That because the Tana wanted to mention Mekaymin, the Tana would also put in Soimchin. It's completely independent. So therefore, I feel it should be a raya that smicha is only allowed if it's gore for cotton. But the Gemara, once the Gemara questioned this raya, the Gemara still wasn't confident with this raya that smicha is covered by the same restrictions, and smicha also requires gore for cotton. So the Gemara continues to probe for a more definitive clarification to this shaila. If you have a kira that is not gore for cotton, of course I can't put a pot on it, but may I put a pot beside it? Tashma. And this is explicit. Kira shesikua, the gavis of the eitzim, soim chinla, period. It's black and white. So you see, even though you didn't make gar for although ein mekaymin, although you're not allowed to make shehiyah, you're definitely allowed to make smicha. Now the Brisa says something else. Now the Gemara has a new shaila. So we finish with the shaila of smichas, and the Brisa clearly says that smichas is not as chomer as putting a pot on a stove, and therefore, even if the stove is not properly prepared for Shabbos, it still has glowing coals in it. You're still allowed to put a pot up on the outside of that kira beside it. What if I had coals that I didn't?
Sorry, Yossi. with the smicha, so is that referring to like Erev Shabbos, or are you allowed to put it back and forth on Shabbos?
I think even on Shabbos, yeah.
Okay.
You're allowed to put something here.
So you can remove it and put it back.
Yeah. So if you're allowed to take a pot that's not hot, or you take a challah and you can put it up against a warm pot on Shabbos so that it should get some heat from it.
Okay.
Toshma, kira shesikua. I'm sorry, that's weiter. What happens if I didn't make oil for cotton, but the coals die down on their own, as all coals do eventually? So you have coals that die down. Or instead of putting ash on it, you put some fuzz of linen, of pishtan. Harehi ketuma, that's like ketuma, because it in fact has the same effect. The nourish of pishtan also dies down the flame, and if the flame it died down on its own and you didn't take any action to flare it up, they both show that you're not concerned about heating this up.
Pishtan itself will flare it up. What do you mean? It's a fuel, pishtan.
I'm not sure. Maybe Na'arish Pishtan doesn't burn. What is exactly this Na'arish Pishtan? It's obviously something that doesn't flare up. It's a chaff of flax. Whatever it is, it doesn't flare up. It actually smothers it. So I'm not sure exactly what it is. You're right. If you put like kindling wood or paper, it would flare right up.
Sure.
So it's probably something that doesn't flare up.
Okay.
Maybe there's moisture in it. I don't know. What if you make ketima and on its own it flared back up? So the halach is mashin aleh chamin shehukmu kol tzarchan v'tavshel shabishel kol tzarchan. You're allowed to make shehiyah on it. Shemamina, you see from here. Now it can't be because it's still katam because it flared up. So that cannot possibly be the reason why we allow you to leave food on there. It must be, it's because it's fully cooked. And because of that, the Gemara says, Shemamina, mestamik v'yafale mutter. From here we would prove that if it's fully cooked, even though additional cooking will benefit that dish, nevertheless it's still mutter because it's fully cooked. And once it's fully cooked, there's no more gzera of Shem. But it's not because you make ketima already. Zok Gemara, who said? Shiny yachad khatma. Maybe the reason is because you made ketima. Once you made ketima once and you showed that your das is that you have no intention of flaring this flame up, even if it flames up later, maybe that's not a problem. Zok Gemara, that cannot be the chiddush of the brayso. Ihachi ma'ila memra. If that's the chiddush, what is the chiddush at all? It's pashut. Tosfos asks, you just totally discounted that shot, and now you're adapting it, and you're saying ma'ila memra? Clearly, it's a chiddush to say that. So Tosfos has a whole shtickle. He does logistical calisthenics to get around it. But Dr. Gemara, in fact, there's a chiddush. The chiddush is that even though you make ketima, since it flared up, you might think that that's mevatel, the original ketima. Once it flares up, it's mevatel, your original ketima, kamash malon, that it doesn't. So in fact, that's the chiddush here, that once you make ketima and you sort of made up that you're not going to be concerned about flaring up this flame, if it flares up on its own, it doesn't matter. It's still considered katam, and you're still allowed to make shehiyah according to Rabbanon and chazara according to Chananya. Amar Rabbi Rabbachanan Megrechadim. Katma v'hovara. What would be the halacha again if you make ketima and it flared up? Mashin aleh chamin shehuchmu kol tzarchan. You're allowed to leave chamin on it, water that's fully cooked. The top shel should be shel kol tzarchan, and top shel is fully cooked. Afilu gecholim shel reisim. Even coals that really retain their heat and they're very strong coals, even that ketima helps. Shmamina, you see from here, mistamak v'yafalei mutter. The same thing we had a moment ago. So Gemara shani yachad dekatma, ihachi ma'ila memra. So Gemara hovers trichalei. So Gemara hainuhach. Now that we want to say that the chiddush of this last thing we said is exactly the same as the previous Gemara, why would the Gemara repeat itself? Reb Yitzchok Yehoshua said this halacha already before. Why would Rabbi Bar Yochanan repeat the exact thing that Reb Yosy Simon said? Zok Gemara, there's a difference. The difference is the cholim shel roshim is strichale. Rabbi Bar Yochanan wanted to say that if it flares up, it's not a problem, not only by standard gecholim, but even by gecholim shorosim, which you might claim is different. And there, maybe it is mevatel, the original ketima, because they're very strong coals. Kamash Milan, even there, once you make ketima, you're made in the shade. And you have no reason to worry, and you're allowed to make chazara according to Chananya, and you're allowed to make shehiyah according to their mother. I'm not sure if it's already after 8. Should we stop here?
Yeah.
Okay, so I believe today's daf is Lamed Zayin. So we're doing pretty okay because we're only less than the Amid behind, so we should be able to catch up next couple of days. What is our schedule for today?